HPLC is the world's most popular analytical tool, yet it intimidates some people because of the mechanical aspects and the chemical aspects of it. So I already did a deep dive in the chemical part, so if you want to learn about separations, definitely check out that what we call the Kool-Aid video. You'll love it. But now let's talk about the hardware. And what I want to do is make this sort of a troubleshooting and maintenance kind of a basis. So I've already talked about the bits and pieces, but now I want to go back in and talk about the recommendations I have for each piece, or what you need to know to make sure your HPLC is always working properly. These are the tiny little things that will really give you longevity in terms of the column and pump seals and that sort of thing. So let's start at the very top. We talked about our solvent bottles. We have water in A and methanol in B, but let's do a little deeper dive in what's really in bottle A. So bottle A is aqueous, it's water, it's typically your phosphate buffer or your acetate buffer. In my case, I have some acid in the mobile phase. I use phosphoric acid, 0.3%. If you want to find out why, you got to do a little deeper dive. I do a whole lecture on HPLC of acids and bases. You'll look into that. But we typically will add some buffer, some pH adjustment to our water bottle. If you're running a method and it calls for a buffer, that means you want to stay within a certain pH range. I typically run things at very low pH. I run everything at pH 2. So for that purpose, I just put acid in the mobile phase. So I've got a little bit of acid in here. That's for chromatographic reasons. Now let's talk about a cool little secret that I use to keep the HPLC functioning properly, and that is, you'll notice that I add 5% methanol to my water bottle. Let's talk about that for a second. If you have a bottle of water, that's a phosphate buffer or acetate buffer at a pH of 5 or 6 or 7, you have created a feast for every bug, every microbe in the world to come and eat and multiply. You will grow algae in your mobile phase bottle. I don't know what it is, different microbes, that kind of stuff, but I'll just call it algae, slimy stuff that you can actually visibly see growing in your water bottle. Now, this is a big deal in HPLC because if that slimy stuff grows, first of all, organic growth is giving off organic acids. We'll start to pick up those impurities in our mobile phase. It's also a physical problem. It physically plugs the filters in the water bottle itself, and it could actually get further on into the instrument and cause damage. So let's talk about how do we avoid this microbial algae growth in our water bottle. Now, if you listen to the manufacturer's recommendations, they make it sound real simple. They say, step 1, sterilize your water bottle. Step 2, make fresh mobile phase buffer every single morning. Now, reality check here. I am too lazy to make up new buffer every day. I don't do that. I think most of us will probably be like, what? Every single morning and sterilize your water bottle? Has anyone actually sterilized their water bottle before? So yeah, put a note in the comments if you have, because I haven't done it. So there's another approach, and that is, well, what if I add some biocide? What if I add something to the water bottle that kills all the bugs? In the olden days, let me say, in the olden days, we used to use sodium azide, 100 ppm sodium azide in the mobile phase. We don't use that anymore. I'm sure some people do. Biotech people still use it, but sodium azide is an allergen or a sensitizing agent. So companies have gotten away from that. So I tell you what I use. I use methanol in my water bottle. I put 5% methanol in. I meter it in, so I measure it exactly. I have a jug of, in the back we have jugs of water that we call HPLC grade, or HPLC water. And it contains HPLC grade water plus 5% methanol plus 0.3% phosphoric acid. That is my standard water bottle for, you can look on 11 of my 12 instruments, HPLCs right now have that sitting in the water bottle. Number 12 is a little different than the rest. So you get the idea that water should have some kind of a, I'll call it a preservative in it. Now you got to be careful. You can't add regular preservatives because they contain UV chromophores. You'll add problems. You'll add impurities to your baseline. So I've always been a big fan of adding some biocide. I use 5% methanol. I'm no microbiologist, but I could go a month, guaranteed a month, without getting any kind of growth in the water bottle. Without that, you would have a problem within a couple of days. Certainly within a week, you would see floaty things. So whenever I pick up the water bottle, I always swirl it and then I hold it up to the light. And what I'm looking for is little floaties. Any tiny little things that look like strings or anything like that. If you see any floaties at all, you should dump that bottle, you should rinse it out, rinse it with some methanol, sterilize it, and then let's go back to the beginning and make the water bottle clean. Now, if it sounds like I'm being really paranoid about the water bottle, I am, and let me explain why. If you get an impurity in your water bottle, the mobile phase on the column, you put about 1,000 times more mobile phase than sample. If you make a 10 microliter injection, and if you run 10 mils of mobile phase for equilibration, then that's 1,000 times different, which means 1 ppm impurity. If you had naphthalene, 1 ppm impurity in your water bottle, it would show up in every sample as 1,000 ppm impurity, a gigantic peak in every sample. So when people are chasing little impurities, they say, I have this peak, it looks about 20 ppm. It could be an impurity that's 20 parts per billion in their water bottle. There's this concentration effect. So be paranoid about your water bottle. Think about cologne, perfume, hand cream, hand sanitizer. Just think about anything that you could smell is in the vapor state is going to get into your water bottle. It's going to cause problems. It's going to cause impurities later on. In fact, I'm so paranoid about the water bottle that I generally do not use funnels. I do not use filters because I always ask the question, where is your filter apparatus right now? Is there one dust particle on it? If so, then we're going to add more impurities than we're going to take out. So when I refill these bottles, I try and do it directly with the 1 gallon jugs, and I pour it directly into the bottles. I try not to use funnels. You could use funnels, but think about where it is. You want to rinse it before you use it, store it in a Tupperware container or in a Ziploc bag. You want to protect it from chemicals, which are all around us. So those are the particulars about the water bottle. It sounds paranoid, but if you do that, you will not have microbial growth problems. If you get those problems, it could cause issues not only in the water bottle, but inside the pump itself. The other bottle is 100% methanol. I don't do anything special that I see some, I've known some people that will add some water to the methanol, and the theory is that it's easier to equilibrate a column. That's not true. There's no basis, there's no data that supports that. So I always put 100% methanol or 100% acetonitrile. Remember, you're going to choose your mobile phase, methanol or acetonitrile, either one. If you want to know the deep dive in it, check out one of my videos when I talk about mobile phases. But for the most part, you're going to choose one or the other. I won't say they're interchangeable, but most things that can be done with methanol can be done with acetonitrile and vice versa. So this is your strong solvent, and it's just pure strong solvent. Notice a little extra thing on my cap. I do have a little filter on it. If you think about the fact that we have a little outgassing, or we have a little bit of evaporation of the methanol going on, and to keep it from evaporating into the room, it's a cool little cartridge filter I think we got from MacMod that helps keep that stuff out of the air. And yes, if you look really carefully, you can see that it's time to change it. See, isn't that great? I left it on there on purpose so I could show you that it'll tell you when it's time to change that little cartridge. Okay, so once we have the mobile phase in the bottles, there's not a whole lot we worry about up here. We keep them capped. Remember, no fingerprints, no cologne, perfume. We want to keep them nice and clean. And then from here, we go on to the degasser. So I showed you before that we go in the degasser. And degasser, very simple device, got a vacuum pump in there. And I always say you plug it in, turn it on, and it works forever. It never goes bad. Well, the only thing you could do to make it go bad, and this is on you, I'll tell you the most common thing people do to break their degasser. So please do not do this. And that is they precipitate buffer inside one of the channels. Okay, I got 4 channels, A, B, C, and D. Each one is independent. They're their own bundle of tubing. The problem is the tubes are really, really tiny. So let me tell you, worst case scenario. Someone has a phosphate buffer running in channel A. High concentration of phosphate, 25 millimolar, 50 millimolar. Life is good. Then they decide they're going to put acetonitrile in channel A. I don't know why acetonitrile should go in channel B, but if you were to put acetonitrile in a channel that already had a phosphate buffer in it, phosphate buffers are notoriously insoluble in acetonitrile. They will crash out and precipitate, completely blocking that tube. So if you call up Axion or Waters, you say, hey, I precipitated buffer in one of the tubes, they're going to say, I got bad news for you. That entire vacuum chamber is one part, and you're going to buy the whole thing, and it's really expensive. So if you plug up channel A, let's face it, we only use 2 channels. We only use A and B. So if you plug up A, then switch to B and C. If you plug up B, switch to C and D. If you plug up C, shame on you, then you have to get a new degasser. Best answer, don't plug up the channels. If you leave A for aqueous, whether it's phosphate buffer, or acetate buffer, or pure water, or water plus acid, it doesn't matter. Water is water, aqueous is aqueous. It will keep it in solution. The only times you have problems is when you have a buffer followed by a strong solvent, or vice versa, strong solvent followed by a buffer, and you get immediate precipitation inside the degasser. So that's the only thing, I shouldn't say the only, that's the major thing that I see go wrong with degassers. Over time, when they get really old, eventually the vacuum pump could go bad. It's pretty clear when that happens. It'll give you the error, but we're talking, it's not going to happen in the first 10 years of your instrument. So the Degasser, not a whole lot of maintenance if you treat it properly. The major maintenance item in your HPLC is going to be your HPLC pump. The pump is doing all the work, right? It is moving back and forth. It is producing extremely high pressures of 9,000 psi. It has to produce a flow rate precision within 1% RSD, and much less than that. So it's got to produce the right flow. It's got to produce the right blend of methanol and water, because any one of those problems is going to affect our chromatography. So the pump is really well designed. And it's the thing that eventually is going to require maintenance. So again, I say 85% of all that maintenance is on your pump. The top half should require no maintenance. Your autosampler has one piece that you're going to replace someday. It's called the rotor seal. Column compartment should never go bad. And your detector, when the light bulb burns out, we replace the light bulb. So you get the idea that maintenance is pretty logical every place. But the major part of it is going to be inside the pump itself. So let's talk about pump maintenance. First, how do I know I have a problem with the pump? Well, we look at the pressure readout, and it's called the pressure ripple. What it is the short-term pressure changes. So remember, in theory, you want to have constant pressure. In real life, there is some variation, and that variation is called the ripple, pressure ripple, short-term pressure variation, and that should be, by spec, should be less than 2%. So if you're running 100 bar, then 2% would be plus or minus 2 bar. So you get the idea of how much you're allowed to have. What I'm going to do as we talk about the instrument, I'm going to go ahead and turn it on. And by doing this, we'll hear the pump start up. And as it starts up, it's going to start generating a pressure curve where we could actually look at the pressure. So when an HPLC pump has a problem, the first thing we'll usually notice is a pressure fluctuation. So if you have a leak, if you have a check valve or a pump seal that's wearing out, you have any little imperfection in the pump, you're going to see a variation in the pressure. So the pressure ripple, if it's a pump problem, it will be very periodic, very normal. In other words, it'll look like a sine wave. So this is pump noise. So notice the pump is doing the same thing, the same way, the same speed all day long. So the noise is very periodic. As opposed to detector noise. Detector noise is just random. It's just random, whether you got a broken flow cell, you got a drips on it, you got a condensation on it, you got a light bulb going bad, you're going to get random noise. So this is detector noise, this is pump noise. So pump noise, when we see it, we know we have an issue. The biggest cause of pump noise, the pressure ripple, is an air bubble in the pump. It's right there in the inlet check valve. So the first thing we do to get rid of an air bubble is to open up the purge valve and turn the flow rate up to a really high flow rate. So as I do this, we're going to go back and forth a little bit, where you're going to be watching both the live LC and what's going on in the software. So I'm going to take right now I've got the flow rate hovering at 0.2 mils a minute. I'm going to take the flow rate to 2 mils a minute, just so we get a reasonable pressure here on the screen. And once it settles out, we'll take a little closer look at that. So what happens when an air bubble gets in? Remember, air is compressible. Like if I take air and increase it from 0 to 1,000 psi, I could do that. Liquids are very slightly compressible. If I take water from 0 to 1,000 psi, it compresses about that much. So the pump is designed to pump things that are not compressible. It knows liquids. It knows acetonitrile and water, methanol, and those are compressibility very low. If something gets in there that compresses, it drives the pump nuts. Either the pump will just not work, it moves but nothing comes out, or something comes out but it's not reproducible, so you never want to operate with an air bubble in the pump. So at this point, if we look at the screen, I'm going to click on pump pressure. I'm going to adjust to bring it onto our scale. So I'm going to blow it up here. So you're going to see the ripple. So don't get scared. We're going to see noise on here. And this is real. So remember, we're measuring the pressure fluctuation in real time, but look at the fluctuation. It looks like I'm going from 363.5 to 364.5. Okay, so I have a 1 bar fluctuation out of a 360 bar pressure. So 360 bar, 2% would be 7.2 bar. So I could bounce plus or minus 7 bar and still be within spec. I'm only bouncing plus or minus 1 bar, which means my pump is in excellent shape. So if you do that, look at the trace, look at the pressure trace, you could tell mechanically what's going on with your pump. It should be constant, but when you're looking at my screen, you're seeing that variation. Remember, that is the real pressure in real time going across the pump strokes itself. So it's doing exactly what it should be doing, and that fluctuation should be minor. So let's say the fluctuation is really big. It's going plus or minus 20 bar. Probably got an air bubble. How do we cure that? I'm going to open the purge valve. So right now our pressure is 365 bar or 354 bar. When I open this up, it's going to drop to 0. So I open it up. You see the pressure drops to 10, drops to 5 bar, 9 bar. So it drops to a very low bar. And that means I'm pumping straight out to waste. I'm not pumping through the instrument anymore. By the way, some people will say, never do that. Don't ever pressure shock a column. Don't ever just open the pressure up. That's nonsense. You cannot damage a column. Silica-based columns, all the columns we use today, I used to pack columns. If you ever saw the extreme conditions we use for packing columns, you'd never worry about breaking a column in your lab. So opening it up, high pressure, low pressure, pressure shocks are non-issue today with silica-based columns. If you're doing gel filtration, gel permeation, fragile columns, yeah, you got to be careful there. But the rest of us, we don't worry about that. So you open the purge valve, and then I typically turn the flow rate up to 5 mils a minute. So we're going to make that 5 mils a minute. I'm going to say OK. You can hear the pump is sped up, and now what it's doing is just pumping really, really fast through here, and it's coming right out the purge valve. I don't know if you can see in the waistline. I could probably do this for you. If I pop this off, you'll probably see it dripping out very quickly, coming out of the pump. Yes. So we're running 5 mils a minute, and the idea is if there's a bubble in there, it's caught underneath the ball and seat, and it doesn't really want to be there. So high flow rate will just sort of flush it out of the way. Some people will take a small wrench and tap on the check valve, inlet check valve, outlet check valve. I don't think the tapping really hurts or helps. I think it just makes you feel like you're doing something. So if you want to tap, go ahead and do it. Don't pick up a hammer, right? Just something small to tap on. Once I've done that, I'll come back here and I'll set the flow rate back to 2 mils a minute, which is what I'm using for this method. I will close the purge valve. Remember with purge valves, they don't need to be monster tight. There's a reason why they gave you a round valve. If Agilent wanted you to crank on this, they would have put a sidearm on so you could do that. The fact that it's round means it's a needle valve. Needle valves, real simple operation. The needle is up and it's open, the needle's in the seat and it's closed. Well, if you tighten it, then you're just pushing the needle further into the seat. You're not making it tighter, you're actually deforming the seat. Eventually it's going to start to leak. So be careful not to over tighten this. It should be snug, but you don't have to get a wrench or anything like to tighten this up. So now if we look back at our pressure, we've come back up to where we were before. Let me zoom out of here so we could take another close little look. And we can see our pressure ripple is back to where we were. Okay, so now if we look at two things, I'm looking at the baseline. I'm just going to go in here and change the scale so they have a reasonable scale. I'm going to put it on scale about 500. Okay, so now we are essentially ready to run a sample. So let's see. What I'll do first is I will show you the details on how to look at a chromatogram and how to decide if it's good chromatography. So we're going to start a run. So I'm just going to go over here and my sample info. My name is up there. I call everything test because I can type it with one hand. But we can say 4 peaks. 4 peaks. I look at the instrument, everything is green. That means I got my autosampler, my pump, my column compartment, my detector. Everything is green, which means they're all ready to go. If I click the start button, what it's going to do, it's going to tell the autosampler to do its thing. So first, it's going to balance or zero the detector. Once it does that, it's going to tell the autosampler to do its little song and dance. And as we hear it making noise, that first noise was the valve switching to the bypass mode. So now you'll probably see the needle moving around, and what it's going to do is it moves to the sample, draws in sample, and then that last little sound you heard, that was the valve rotating back into what's called main pass. So that picked up the sample. The sample is now traveling through the column. Now I can take this off. We can't see anything, right? We can't see through the stainless steel, But what's going on right now is the sample is traveling through this column, and just like the Kool-Aid, the components are entering at the same time, but they are beginning to separate. And with a little bit of luck, by the end of the column, they will have all separated. Now in this case, we are not looking at the red and the blue coming off, just like in the Kool-Aid experiment, but our detector is seeing everything coming off. So as we look at our chromatogram, I'm just going to zoom in on this portion of it, we can see that in this case, I have a void volume marker, the T0 marker, and then I have 3 peaks of interest. And we see the first 2 have come out, waiting for the third one, and there's the third one. So when we look at the chromatogram, we're looking for a nice flat baseline. Remember, we don't want to see that wavy baseline. We're also looking for symmetrical peaks. We want them to be tall, skinny, symmetrical. In this case, the peaks look beautiful. If I press the stop button, what it will do is it'll stop acquiring data. Notice the instrument keeps running. So stop means stop data acquisition, don't stop the instrument. We like the instrument running all day long, keep the column happy. So in this case, it stops acquiring, analyzes the data, finds the baselines, and then gives us a printout. And the printout, again, shows us the chromatogram, and on the second page, tells us a little extra information about how skinny are the peaks and how good is the separation. In this case, I'm running about 7,500 theoretical plates. It's a nice number of plates. Okay, so I just took you through how we were to make an injection on HPLC and how to just nominally analyze the data, look at the chromatogram. What are we looking for? We're looking for a nice flat baseline, and we're looking for symmetrical peaks. Okay, so now I'd like to take you to do some in-depth look at the HPLC pump itself. Remember I said this is where most of your maintenance is going to be, and the primary maintenance task that you're going to do is you're going to change your pump seals. Pump seals need to be changed. I say you change them twice a year. Every 6 months is a great program to get on. How long do pump seals last? We really don't know. It depends what you're doing with them. In my opinion, they easily last a year, but if you change them every 6 months, they'll never wear out. That's important because if pump seals wear out, if they break during a run, then if you're a pharmaceutical company especially, then you have to repeat all the results. You get a bunch of blank chromatograms, and you got to write a big story, big letter to the FDA explaining why you're throwing away all that data. So we generally don't like to operate when the system is broken. So we change the pump seals, preventative maintenance. We change them every 6 months so they never wear out. So in changing the pump seals, just about every HPLC instrument in the world uses the same procedure, but there's a little different way to get to them. But once you get to the pump seals, to me, it's all the same. So I'll show you how to do it on this design. The Axion design is the same all the way back to the late 80s. We went from the 1050 to the 1100, the 1200, the 1260s. I got the 1260 Infinities, got the Infinity 2s. They all have the exact same pump heads, and you'll see this common design across all different folks out there. So the pump head itself, I have one that I've already taken off. So this is the one that's operational. So these guys are both doing their thing, and this is what it looks like outside of the instrument. So to take it off, there's just 2 screws that you take off. They're really long, so be prepared for that. They're called M5 screws. They're like this long. So you take them out, you disconnect. I think there's 5 pieces of tubing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You disconnect those, and then this whole thing just it's on a rail, and it just slides right off. And then you could take this to your desk and sit down and do maintenance. So let me show you a couple of the parts. This is the purge valve up front, right? This is what we open and close to send the output straight to waste. Now inside the purge valve, there's a little filter. And what's interesting is if you were paying attention to my current HPLC instrument, if I open the purge valve, the pressure should go to 0. In theory, right? Because I'm pumping through this hollow piece of tubing, I should have no pressure at all. In real life, mine is at 10 bar. So there's some resistance in there. I didn't expect this, but there's some resistance in there, which means there's a filter inside here that's plugged up. Now, it's not terribly plugged. I've seen them go up to 400 bar and literally shut down an instrument. So this one is a 10 bar, what's that, 150 PSI. My pump's working a little harder than it needs to. So let me show you where that filter is. It's called the PTFE frit. I call it a cigarette filter. It looks like a cigarette filter. And if you remove this purge valve, so there's a little wrench comes with your LC. It's a 14 millimeter flat wrench. It fits right behind, right in that little slot. It fits right here. It's hard to get, can't find that at the Home Depot. It's hard to find a skinny one. So you go in here and you loosen this guy up. And when you take it out, on the inside, you have a what's called a gold seal. And this you just pop off with your thumb. And inside, you have a PTFE frit. It looks like a cigarette filter. It's a tiny little filter inside. Okay, so just take a little push pin, and we're just gonna sort of skewer it and pull it out. And that is our little filter. It's called the PTFE frit. And there's a hole on one side, and there's a peg inside there. And you suddenly get to the point where you just push it in, put the new one on. They come in like 5-packs. So you put the new one on, you put the gold cap back on. I've never had to replace one of these. I mean, I've taken them out, put them back on 100 times. I don't know if eventually they wear out, but I have replacements, but I've never had to replace one. So you put this guy back on, that's the sealing surface, and when you screw it back on, you are good to go, and your filter is now clean. The filters will get dirty because of particulates in the mobile phase or just in general growth here and there. So it is one of those preventive maintenance things that I do recommend you get on every once in a while and change them. So the next thing we want to look at is, so that's the PTFE frit itself. The next, the most important thing is going to be inside the pump head, and that is going to be our pump seals. So the first thing, once this has been removed from the LC, I always say you try and remove the pistons first. And the reason is the pistons are made out of sapphires, so they're not really being held in by anything. So if you notice, I just took out these two pieces, and they're sapphire rods. And the reason why we use sapphire is because it's a very hard material, if you remember your hardness scale, and it's also very smooth. So this has to withstand very high pressures. We have to have a seal around it to withstand the pressures. So the next step is to remove the two parts of the pump head, and that's just a loosening screw. So when we release the two parts, we have on one side, we have the little piston rings, the little guides to make sure the pistons go straight. And then inside there, you'll see a spring, a couple of springs. I always check those springs, make sure they're not corroded. If you have leaky pump seals, if they've been leaking for a while and you're using buffers, you'll see some salt deposits back here. That's a sign that you've had a leak. So just take a water squirt bottle and squirt it on there to get rid of the salt deposits. In this case, it's nice and clean, so I don't have to worry about that. And then this is where we're going to find the pump seals. So if you see those two little pieces of black plastic, those are the pump seals, and eventually they're going to wear out. So how do you remove them? There's a couple of different approaches, but my favorite approach is just to use the piston itself. You put it in just a little bit, and it's probably going in a millimeter or two, and then I simply rotate it out. So you could think about it just, I'm prying it out. Although it sounds strange to use a sapphire rod as a pry bar, you get the idea that you're not prying very hard. So that's the one pump seal. So you always change both pump seals. Never go through all this hassle just to change one. So we change both pump seals. Those are the old pump seals. If you look at them very carefully, sometimes you could see there's a little spring on the inside, and the spring actually helps it grip onto the on the piston itself. So the piston and the piston seal internally are going to fit together like this. On one side, we're going to have 9,000 psi, and the other side, we're going to have 0 psi. So you get the idea of how important that pump seal is. So when it wears out, we're going to replace them. So we're going to get a pack of new pump seals, and here's my brand new pump seals. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut them open here. And so here's my little trick in doing pump seal replacement. And that is, I like to put some isopropanol, and I guess you can see that's isopropanol. I like to take the pump seals and simply soak them in isopropanol, so I'm going to drop them in there. And they really don't have to soak for very long. What I really want is I want them to be wet with isopropanol. So the reason is when the piston seal makes the seal itself, it's not really plastic against sapphire, it's really a layer of liquid in between the plastic and the sapphire, and that is the seal material. You've heard the term priming a pump. Well, the reason you would prime a pump is to make sure there's liquid in there. So my trick is I make sure they're really wet before I even start the procedure, and then when I put them in, guess what? There's already a layer of liquid. I like isopropanol, and the reason is isopropanol is we call it a universal solvent. It could wet any surface. So at this point, I'm simply going to press it in, and you're first going to say to yourself, this is too big, it doesn't fit. I'm trying to show you how it seems like it's too big, but just push it down. Don't be elegant about it. Just shove it down there, because what's about to happen next is when you put this back together, the pump's going to be exerting thousands of PSI onto that little piece of plastic. So whatever you do with your thumb is not going to cause any problems. So now I will get the second pump seal. It's been soaking here in isopropanol. And I'm going to put it in the same way as before. So notice if I just set it in there, it doesn't seem to want to fit, but just shove it down there. Oh, I guess I need my thumb to do that. Just shove it down there. And then my last little trick, ready for this? I take a little transfer pipette, and I take a little more isopropanol, and you guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to make sure these guys are wet. Is this overkill? Yeah, probably. Will this guarantee your pump will work when you turn it back on? Yes. So that's why my feeling is I go through these extra little steps, make sure everything's wet before I put the system back together. So now to reassemble it, notice there's a little peg hanging out here. There's a little notch on the side. Most pumps will be keyed, so you'd only put them together one way. So before we put that together, we need to have the little piston guides. And I'll tell you, I never really remember which way they fit. I don't know, do they fit like this or they fit like this? And I figure, you know, it should snap into place. So that one doesn't really fit, and this side, oh wow, that fits exactly. I found that nothing needs to be forced. Everything should go on just right. And then when we put this back together, to make sure that the peg and the hole line up, we put that together. We then use the little locking pin on the front. There's a little locking pin. So now the two halves will not fall apart. And the last thing you do before you go back to the pump is you're going to take your pistons and you're going to stick the pistons into position. The reason I say we do this last is because the pistons are not really held in by anything. Sometimes there's a little bit of sort of liquid cohesion that holds them in, but they will fall out. And I always joke that a piston will never break inside the HPLC. It'll only break if you drop it on the ground. So let's minimize the chance of dropping it. At this point, we have brand new pump seals. We're going to put this onto the HPLC instrument, and it's ready to go. There's an old-fashioned approach called the seal wear-in procedure. I don't believe in it. If you start with the seals wet, you will not have a problem. If you start with the seals dry, you got a 50-50 chance of it working. Then you got to do a special procedure to set the seals, is what they call it. So wet them with isopropanol and follow that procedure, and you'll be able to change any pump seal on any pump out there known to man. And then we just put them back on the rail, put all the way back in. And then when you tighten the screws, those two long screws, you want to tighten them in stepwise. So the first one, you're going to notice that when you put it on, there's a spring in there and it's cocked back maybe a half an inch. So you got to keep tightening each one, like tighten this one 5 times and this one 5 times, this one. Keep going back and forth because you'll find that one is totally tight, you're done, and then the other one's a little loose. So you tighten it up, and then the first one's loose, and then the second one's loose. That's because you're stepping it in, and eventually you'll get stainless steel against stainless steel, and you'll tighten it, you'll know it's tight. Okay, that is the #1 procedure you're going to have to do on an HPLC pump. You will have to do that someday. I say do it every 6 months. Yeah, in real life, you could probably get away with 2 or 3 years if you're running just methanol water, but good idea, change them often so you never have a problem, so it never actually breaks in the middle of a run. Okay, that's pump maintenance. The next piece of the LC that needs maintenance, we'll talk a little bit about maintenance of the autosampler. So first question I always ask is how do I know my instrument's broken? Instead of saying, let's just go in on a random Thursday and start taking things apart, let's decide when something's broken, when it needs to be fixed. So how do I know my autosampler has a problem? Well, let's turn the question around. What's the autosampler's job? Its job is to inject the exact same amount of sample every single time. Every single time, exact same amount of sample. So if that's doing its job, then my peak areas and my peak heights should be reproducible. If I inject a standard 10 times in a row, I should get the exact same areas and heights 10 times in a row. If area and height are reproducible, your autosampler is fine, guaranteed. If your heights and areas are not reproducible, you're getting plus or minus 10%, then your autosampler is broken. What part of the autosampler is broken? It's the rotor seal. The rotor seal is going to wear out. Now it's good for, let's say, 20,000 plus injections. For most people, that's a couple of years. But if you're a high volume lab, this might come more often than you think. And it's inside the autosampler itself, and it's inside the radiodyne valve. The radiodyne valve is what switches us from online to offline, or from main pass to bypass. It's what isolates the high pressure from the low pressure parts of the system. The way it works is it has 6 connecting pipes, and you see the 6 tubes going in. Boy, I'm always challenged to see if I can name all 6 of them. Well, we know this is high pressure flow coming in, so that's flow coming from the pump, which means that's going to the column, which means the other side is going to the autosampler. So one of these must be coming back from the autosampler, right? So that's the needle seat coming back in. One of them is plugged up because we don't use it, and the other one, I don't know a better way to explain this except to call it a spit valve, and that is we have some liquid in there under pressure, and we release the pressure, and I don't know, maybe there's a little droplet left over, and it comes out a little spit valve. Yeah, there's other designs that avoid that little pressure thing, but it's not a big deal. It's there, and to me, you'll never really see liquid coming out of it. So that's the radiodyne valve. It's got these 6 ports. If I had 6 fingers, this would be perfect. It has these 6 connections, and they're coming in here, and this valve can connect any one to the one next to it. So it can do this, right? It's a 1/6 of a turn, or it can do that. So it can connect 1 to 2 or 1 to 6. So it's a little slider that just moves back and forth. That little slider, I'm going to attempt to show it to you. So what you're looking at here is a rotor seal. It's a polyimide, it's a plastic material. And if you can see those 2 little, what I call smiling faces, they're teeny tiny, 2 little, those are the connecting pipes. Those are the things that connect 2 ports to one another. So what could go wrong with this thing? Well, over time, this is pressed against a piece of ceramic, and it rotates 1/6 of a turn every single time, and they're pressed together really tightly. Eventually, the face of that is going to wear out. And when it wears out, there's one and only one thing that happens, and that is you lose area and height reproducibility. So when you have area and height reproducibility problems, the first thing we say is, let's just change that rotor seal. There's really nothing much else that causes that. So the rotor seal is inside the injection valve. So every LC injector in the world, autosampler, has some form of this valve. It's the radiodyne 7125 or some version of it where it's called a 6-port valve. You can see 6 little holes in the back, and this is what's used to make the injection. Over time, the rotor seal is going to wear out, and when it does wear out, it's going to cause a reproducibility problem in your peak areas and your peak heights. So area and height reproducibility should be like 1 or 2%. If it's in the 10 to 20% range, then you know you got a problem with the rotor seal. So to dismantle this, you could do this with this still in the instrument. I have one that I've taken out of the instrument, so to give you a better feel for what you're about to do. But usually this is mounted in the instrument. This part is facing out. There are 6 pieces of tubing that are going in here. So you could either remove all 6, or with a little bit of luck, you can actually try and disassemble it with the tubing still on there. Officially, you're supposed to take the 6 fittings out first, which is what we've done. So I have you get an Allen wrench, and mine is labeled. How do I have mine labeled? It's labeled R for radiodyne, because how many times have you reached in the drawer and tried the 20 wrenches only to find that the right one is in your pocket? So this one we have labeled. So what we want to do is we want to loosen these 3 hex nuts, and You know, back in the day, we would actually have torque settings for them, and we talked about the higher torque you set on them, the higher pressure the valve can withhold, but the sooner that you're going to start to wear out the rotor seal. Nowadays, we really don't, as far as I'm aware of and I'm concerned, we really don't use the torque settings, torque wrench on this thing anymore. So these are the 3 screws, and when you remove them, you're going to see a whole bunch of little parts. Not a whole bunch, just a couple of them. And they may fall out in different orders and that kind of stuff. But to put it back together, it really only goes back together one way. So don't worry about that part of it. So if you can see what I'm doing, I'm just removing those 3 screws. So I'll set those aside with the radine. So now I could remove the back part of this valve, and when I remove it, what you're going to see there is, this is called the stator, so this is stationary, and when we remove that, underneath it is what we call the rotor seal. So that piece of black plastic in there, it's a polyimide. Eventually it's going to wear out, and if you look at it very closely, you can see those 3 little, I'll call them smiley faces. Those are the connecting pipes. That's what's going to actually connect one position to the next. So remember I said this can only go back together one way. You see the back of the stator, those 2 little pegs? Well, those are going to fit in these 2 little holes, and that's going to align everything. So it's, I would say, more tedious than it is difficult. So the next part is we're going to remove that seal. So you can either pull this whole part out. This part is going to remain inside the instrument, so you don't have to worry about that. And so this is the rotor seal. This is the part that is going to get damaged. Over time, it'll wear out, and when it wears out, it causes the area and height reproducibility, so you're injecting the wrong amounts of material. Now, there's another little, so when we replace it, we replace the rotor seal, and there's another secret little piece that we're going to replace, and it's called the isolation seal. And the best way I describe it is just stick your finger in there and see what happens. So if you stick your finger in, if you see what came out the other side, you see that? That's called the isolation seal, and it's a pump seal. If you look at it, it's a there's a spring inside there. And what's funny is I've never seen it come out, or you tap it, and unless you know it's there, you're not going to be able to find it. And so my trick is stick your finger in there, and your finger will grab it, and it'll come out with your finger. Okay, so these are the 2 parts that we're going to replace. So we replace them with brand new radine parts, and you'll actually get them. Oh my gosh, that's an old one. It still says Hewlett Packard on it. So you get the radine part, and you make sure you get the right rotor seal that goes with your particular injection valve. This one that I showed you that just came out of the package has 2 little ports. The one that was already in there is 3 little ports. So the difference between a common injection valve and a switching valve is just the number of little connections they have on the inside. So when you go to put this back together, you're going to put your isolation seal back in. And let's see, we're going to have our 7125 like that. And this guy is going to go in there, and then the seal itself, you see where technically it fits right on this piece. So you can imagine coming over here and putting it, but it's a lot easier just to go inside and let it stick when we put it back together. So let's put the pieces back together now. Remember, this is going to be part of the instrument. These pegs are going to line up like that. And then at this point is when I typically like to drop in the isolation seal. And then we're going to have our rotor seal. So again, that's the part that's going to wear it out. I'm going to put the same one back in, and because if you look at the little pegs inside there, there's 4 pegs. They're not a complete square. They're a little bit of a, I don't know, is it a parallelogram or I don't know, a trapezoid maybe. So it'll only fit those 4. So that's the nice thing about these valves, is you can't put them together the wrong way. So in this case, we want the smiley faces facing up, right? Because they need to face the next piece. And when we put these 2 together, you notice that there's pegs on here, and they should really only line up in one way, in one direction. So, with a little bit of luck, I can get the 2 things to line up. So to me, there's 2 pieces that have to align. So it's, you'll never get it wrong, but it's a little hard to get it right. You'll see what I mean. So the 3 holes have to match where the screws are going to come in, and then these 2 pegs have to match as well. So I think if we do it like this, we're going to see these 2 pegs match up, and when I put it back together, we will set them in like this. And then when you start to put the valve back together, remember this is going to be on the instrument itself. We go back to our 3 screws, and we put them in there. Once they go in, it'll make your life a little easier, because it'll help you line up the rest of the valve. So again, it's a little easier when it's on the instrument itself, because you don't have to hold this extra piece. It's actually being held in there for you, and that will help you line it up. So no matter which instrument type you have, you're going to have some sort of radine valve in there inside the autosampler. You're going to find the same thing as the switching valve. If you have multiple columns, the column selection valve, the same thing, and we rebuild them all the same way. So that's rebuilding the valve on your autosampler, and that's going to help your reproducibility get back in line. So to me, that accounts for the majority of the maintenance in the instrument is going to be mostly in the pump. Next thing is going to be your autosampler, the rotor seal in the autosampler. The rest of the instrument, we'll talk about the columns as a separate part. And the detector, I sort of joke, the light bulb burns out once a year and you replace the light bulb. You can get a little more sophisticated than that. We can actually monitor the health of the light bulb. We can monitor the energy of it, and we can tell when it's about to go bad. We can do that in the software. But short of that, when the lamp goes bad, we simply replace it. Now, when your lamp goes bad, it doesn't burn out like a traditional a filament lamp. It just gets harder to light. So here's a friendly little piece of advice. If your lamp fails to light, it'll say lamp failed to fire, failed to light. That doesn't mean it's dead. Try it again, try it again, try it again, and I've found that you'll get it to reignite, and when it does, you'll probably get another couple weeks out of it. So when a light bulb burns out, it's not truly burned out. It just requires more energy to get it to ignite. And what you do is you just try and refire it a couple more times, and eventually it'll catch on. That also tells you it's time to order a new lamp. So we could also check the energy of the lamp in the software, but that's an easy way to look at it. So that is HPLC from top to bottom. We went through everything from the solvent bottles all the way down to the detector, and hopefully now you have a better feel for you being in control of the instrument. Yes, it requires maintenance, but the maintenance is not that difficult, and you can do it. So you could pump gas in your own car, you can change your own pump seals in HPLC. If you have more questions or want to learn more, come visit us at Axion Labs and hang out in my lab with my 12 LCs and take them apart and put them back together, or check out some of our more detailed videos where you can learn more about chromatography in action.